close their computers and make sure that attention and eyes are all up here as we do some learning together. Other expectations, being positive. Hopefully the activity we did this morning left you feeling happy and excited and positive for our afternoon together. Being flexible and being willing to move from good to great. As a result of our time together today, I'm hoping that we all gain a deeper understanding of the importance of feedback, because that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes or so. And then you're going to be able to work as a team, grade level team, on a chosen element of assessment literacy. So you guys have already made your decisions about what you're doing. And the one ask I'm going to add to what you're doing today is that you include some conversation and element of feedback in what you're doing. And then at the end, at 3 o'clock today, we will get together and you will celebrate and share what you've worked on, including what you did in the area of feedback. So I'm sure many of you are aware that a few weeks ago, a number of us had the opportunity to go to San Francisco for a 2-day training on developing assessments. And one of my biggest takeaways from that training was feedback, and how important feedback is, and what it looks like, and how students can use it to further their learning. So we're going to start right now by watching a video, and this is Nicole Vogley, who is the woman we got to see, and she's going to talk a little bit about feedback, and then afterwards we're going to have a discussion about it. So I'm going to pass out packets that on the first page has a place for you to take notes. If you want to take notes while you're watching, you can do that. If you prefer to wait until the video is over and take some notes, that's fine too, because I'll give you time afterwards, but just whatever works best for you, okay?
My name is Nicole Vogley, and I want to spend the next few minutes talking about feedback practices and ways to use them to empower students to learn more and to create a culture of learning. When my daughter was in 2nd grade, every Wednesday they would get an object, a paperclip or something like that, and create something with it, and then describe it in writing. On Friday, they'd share them. On Monday, she'd get it back and it would say, super job, or great work, really creative. We've been doing these for a few months, and I noticed that her writing was going across the page like this, and she had capital letters in the middle of her sentences, and her words, excuse me. And so I decided to ask her about it, former English teacher and her mother, and I said, Maya, juicy details. I'm having a little hard time reading your writing. What do you think you could do about it? And she looked at me and she's like, Mom, it doesn't matter. She put super job on it anyway. And I had that moment of pause of, oh my. And I reflected back and I'm like, you know, it's really powerful what we intend as something that's really positive. When students make up their own meaning of the symbols and the words that we write on their paper. And so in the absence of our students knowing what excellent means, they kind of make it up.
So what we're going to do next is a fishbowl activity. I don't know if you've ever done these in your class before, but whether you have or you haven't, there's instructions for doing a fishbowl in here as well. You don't need to look at them now, that's for you for later. But this is something that a fishbowl discussion is good for times when you want to make sure that every single person has an opportunity to speak, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do in just a second is you're going to move to the chairs here. The chairs in the center are going to be the people talking. The chairs on the outside are going to be the people listening. If you are a listener first, your job is to listen to what we're
talking about and maybe think about anything that we're saying that you either agree with or disagree with, because if you want to revisit that when it is your turn to come into the center, because yes, we're going to switch partway through, then we can revisit that or we can continue going on. Okay, so bring your papers with you unless you have your information in your head, and come find a spot in our circles, and hopefully I counted right. All right, so if those of you in the back circle are anything like me, it's going to be really hard to not talk while you're listening to us, but just try really hard to not say anything. And I will facilitate the conversation starting with this, but then sort of try to have it go where it goes based on what people are saying. So just to begin the conversation, those of us here in the inner circle, any new learnings or ahas or things that stood out for you in that video?
For me, it was that feedback should inspire thinking. A lot. I've caught myself, great job. What does great job mean? So be more explicit with your feedback comments.
Yeah, that needs to be inspired and required. Just giving descriptive comments on like what you should be working on, but they also mentioned how you should have like a limit to those amounts of comments, and I thought that was kind of something I need to continue to work with.
And for me, it was the immediacy of it, because often you do that feedback piece at the end, and then even you wait till the next day to give them the opportunities, whereas it should be immediate, like that, right after that, go back and do that.
That was my biggest takeaway. One of my biggest weakness is giving them feedback and allowing them to make those corrections then and there.
That required piece, right, that she talks about, inspired and then required. So let's talk about that. Why do you think it needs to be required that they have an opportunity to go back and respond to the feedback that you've given them? What's the benefit of that?
It's a learning opportunity for them.
Yeah.
They can see their immediate growth.
Yeah,
Right.
because they would put it away and go out of their brain, right? But if they have to do it, then they're learning in that instant.
Well, she talks about the kids that need it most are oftentimes, if it's optional, the ones who aren't going to choose to do it.
Yeah.
So the kids that you most want to take your feedback and apply it are going to be the ones who opt out of it if you don't require it. So
At the training that when she spoke, I don't think it was in this video, about not giving a grade until they've done the required work. And I think that's more important probably in middle school and high school where they get grades, but we just did this in our math, and we did a whole feedback section, and they didn't go home, they didn't get comments from us until they went through and did some error analysis, and then they had more ownership about the feedback they got, and then we sent it home with final comments, and that worked pretty well.
I think we're starting that in third grade too. We just talked about for math, it seems easier for us, or at least for me in math, but like not giving them a grade, but going through and looking at a test and maybe zeroing them in on a problem that they struggle with, and then giving it back and allowing them to fine tune it and kind of make changes before you actually write a score on the top and tell them what their grade is. They have time to go back and revisit.
So some of you mentioned things that you already feel that you're doing well. Is there anybody else who wanted to share, just sort of either in your grade level, in your classroom, as a school, things that we feel sort of already fit with this model, or things we're trying that just fit with the philosophy of both inspiring and requiring? You know, I think I shared with you guys at the beginning of this year that one of the things that was the biggest flip in my mind was how we view assessments, right? And what the purpose of assessments is, and really what they should be doing is inspiring learning and helping kids know what they need to do next. So what things are we already doing well in this area?
Well, I think all of the work we've done with the learning targets and the I can statements give a really concrete purpose to what they are supposed to have, so it allows them and us to look at it and say, okay, so let's see what you've done, and then it allows you to see what the next step is, because whatever they're missing from those I can statements are their obvious next steps. So I think that's a huge help, having all those learning targets with I can statements.
Talking about with the kids, I think we all did a really good job about saying if you're not at a 3, that just means that we know that there's more growth for you to happen, and that's okay. And my job is to get you here collaboratively with you, but it's not a failure, it's just an opportunity for more growth, and that they don't feel deflated when they get a test back that doesn't have the score that they're looking for.
Anything else?
Right now, first grade, we have our readers, writers, kind of line. Now we added our phonics component. Then we'll have like rubrics. So it's just an opportunity again for us to look at them specifically. Okay, you're doing this great job on word strategies. What's another thing you talk about? And goals and targets that the kids can work with. So that's been really helpful.
I know I saw in Mary Jo's class even, I think it was a couple of years ago, just Remember those little cards that you had where the kids were setting their own goals in writing, and it was just like one little thing, like this is what I'm working on. And I thought that was pretty powerful. It just goes back to when kids know what they're supposed to be working on, then it helps.
That's accountable for their
Yeah,
learning.
exactly. Yeah, it keeps them accountable. And then if they know what proficient looks like, they can figure out how to get there. Anything else, Inner Circle?
I just want to add
Yes.
to our UA groups, it's nice that we have the same goals on in every classroom, so kids will go in there and like, oh, it's the same here. it's
Yeah.
the same here. So I like that we're consistent.
Yeah, it's good. All right, you guys can switch. All right, so anything that you guys want to revisit about what we talked about with the Inner Circle last time already, either things that were aha moments for you in the video or things that you feel that we are doing well?
Specific feedback. We expect them to take what we write on here and transfer that to whatever we're doing next, when clearly they probably never processed it.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece for me was like, oh, after all these years, you've never even thought about that. But I told them. They never processed it, they never saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that transfer moment of expecting them to be able to transfer it into the next task or the next, whatever it is you want them to do. Like I know for me, that was a moment that stuck out for me too. Like, oh, that's why. Not that you don't know that's why they're not, but you expect it because you have to move on. And really the key for me is to, for you to do it in the moment.
For the students to provide feedback to the teachers, like a lot of my
Mhm.
aha moments in teaching, I'll give instructions and then I'll jump in and that control piece, and like, you told me, and I was like, you're right, and it was like, whoops. So that was really important time to be reminded of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's being descriptive towards my kids is really important, but also limiting that and making sure that they're understanding what my feedback is. So, being descriptive, but limiting language at the same time for them and making sure they understand is really important.
But it's cool when they come up with their own next steps. I did that for a writing thing. I said, well, what do you think you need to work on next? And they all came up with something really concrete without me having to tell them. I had given them a checklist, so they kind of knew what to draw from, but then they knew specifically what they wanted to work on. And the hard part is then you have to have all this time, especially for writing, because it's such a process to have them go in, revise, okay, it's your next step, but now you got to check this. Did you do it? How do you know? So it makes the process longer, even though they're going deeper, and I think that's a bit of a frustration because you're trying to balance, well, how often do I do this kind of feedback, and how do I make all feedback kind of effective? So I like all this, but it also has that overwhelming feeling like I can't do this on everything, but when I do it, it's super valuable.
That's what I wrote on one of the barriers, was time to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to sit down with the feedback.
And also just have a block of interrupted time, just having the time to just, because I feel like we're always go, 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 on to the next activity. Just, you don't get to everything, it's okay. If your kids are going strong on one thing, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I think she said that when she talked, because I wrote in my notes, the comments to grow versus evaluative comments. And I feel like sometimes maybe I'm not doing a good enough job myself of distinguishing for me, was that a comment to grow or is that an evaluative comment? I don't know. So I need to look at that more closely.
So speaking of barriers, time being one of them, what are some other barriers to being able to provide this kind of feedback? Greg actually mentioned one as far as language, making sure that you're not providing too much language so that it's understandable. And that's true of any student, putting it in language that they can understand. So what are some other possible barriers and solutions to these barriers?
Awareness in really young people. Some of my kids think it's perfect, they're super proud no matter what, and then others think there's just an all or none mentality of like, I did it great. What are you talking about?
Training them to be like, no, you're not. Like,
But them saying I made a mistake isn't like, well, you stink, kid, go sit down. Like, it's fine to make a mistake, but creating that awareness that, like, self-checking or editing or any of that just is hard to explain to a little person.
Mhm.
Why would you need to go back? You did it again. So that kind of waiting for that development to occur. Otherwise, it's me saying, let's self-evaluate you together, and it's really my evaluation.
And sensitive kids with
Yes.
behavior, some of them, it can be descriptive and talk to them about the process, but they're still going to take it to heart and be hard on themselves. So I think that's a challenge, some kids that are really sensitive like that.
Melinda, what were you going to say?
I think, working with littles as we do, if we put down a specific comment on it, they can't read it. So much of what we do is one-to-one conversations, and when you've got 24 students in a class and you're trying to give timely feedback, it's a challenge to do that.
Anything else? All right, so those people who did go to the training have a lot of resources that they might not want to share with you all at once because it would be overwhelming, but they shared a Google folder with all of us. There are tons of different ways to look at feedback and how to provide feedback that inspires students. So as you're working this afternoon with your grade level team, and you are working on whatever in the area of assessment you chose to work on based on what you guys decided, have those conversations about what's one small piece of feedback. What might that look like? If you want to spend time exploring the resources in the Google folder, that's fine. I also have her book, which has a few examples of some feedback tools that you can use. But again, you're going to just work with your team, and then at 3 o'clock we'll get back together and you'll share what you've worked on. Any questions? No? Did you find this fun? You could say no if you didn't think it was fun. This is, you're giving me feedback. Come on. I know. Yeah. Yeah.
On the outside forced me to listen.
Yeah.
Usually I want to jump in.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't. That was actually the-
Yeah. Can you see how you might use this in a classroom? Yeah. So like I said, the other thing I did in here, so the feedback, the note-taking guide is in the front. In the middle is really, this is the printed version of what Nicole said in the video. I just copied it from her book as well, just so in case you like to read it better, if you want to go back and look at some of the things that she was talking about. And then in the back is how you would do a fishbowl and why and how to set it up and stuff like that, if that was something you ever wanted to do in your classroom. Okay? Any other questions or anything before we get started? All right. Have fun. And you have, I'll be here, Lisa Gunderson's here, Padway's here. If you have any questions, need any support with any of those things, just let us know. Okay? All right. Thank you.